Hello everyone, my name is Marcia van Es, Managing Director of PAX. Gender equality is critical to achieving sustainable peace and security. A truly feminist foreign policy is much more than a gender mainstreaming policy and should aim to systematically change unjust global hierarchies. A real FFP is a foreign policy 2.0, which creates a new approach towards visioning in which power inequalities, privileges, and access to resources are questioned in every aspect of states' relations and are reflected in domestic policies. Therefore, our recommended action is to add the R of reimagination to the Swedish list of R's: rights, representation, resources, and reality check. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Roos Boer and I work on humanitarian disarmament. In contrast to traditional disarmament approaches, this people-centered approach to disarmament focuses on protecting the security and well-being of people rather than states. It focuses on preventing and remediating human suffering and environmental harm rather than advancing national security interests. Feminists have long challenged these state-centered notions of security sought to be accomplished by the use of force and militarization. While states have the right to defend themselves, it is important to question whether more investment to the defense industry actually promotes peace, especially when non-violent peace-building efforts do not match these investments by far. States tend to overestimate the efficiency of armed violence and undercount its cost, which feminists have linked to how hegemonic masculinities associate military means with strength. All the while, there is underinvestment in peace building. Feminists have also pointed to the gendered impacts of arms trade and the use of weapons. Yet many feminist foreign policy countries remain invested in arms exports and militarization. They spend only fractions in disarmament and non-violent conflict prevention and transformation on the other hand. So therefore, our recommended action is to invest in demilitarization and non-violent peace building. Human rights standards should be leading, and states should question how security concepts, practices, and spaces are shaped by dominant gender norms and their assumed effectiveness, including long-term effectiveness of UN-led and regional security operations.
This is Maria Labde, Executive Director of Women Now for Development, a Syrian women rights organization. Women are usually representative of the most vulnerable populations. It is why we have been always advocating for women representations. However, a feminist foreign policy should not be only about women. It should be about what women have been and for a very long time advocating for: the protection of human rights and the inclusion of everyone.
My name is Hassan Juma. I represent Abad Resource Center for Gender Equality. At Abad, we are deeply embedded in the complex challenges faced by women and girls in the Middle East, particularly in Lebanon. Our work on the ground had given us a deep understanding of the gender-based violence and inequality that escalates during crises, including the ongoing Palestine-Israel war. We cannot but emphasize the importance of gender analysis that goes beyond merely asking, what is the impact of our policies on women? Instead, we need to incorporate a masculinities lens and a deeper system-based approach that consider how gender norms, roles, and structures contribute to and are affected by armed conflicts and crisis situations. The necessity of legal frameworks specifically tailored to combat gender-based violence in times of conflict cannot be overstated. These laws must not only act as a deterrent, but also provide effective channels for victims to seek justice and recovery and ensure that women and girls are not doubly victimized, first by conflict and second by gender-based violence. Dedicated funding streams must be established to support programs and initiatives aimed at promoting gender equality and combating gender-based violence. This funding should be easily accessible to local NGOs and grassroots organizations that are on the front lines of this fight. Moreover, the voices of local communities and NGOs must be included in the policy-making process to ensure that feminist foreign policies are accurately addressing the real needs of women and girls. We must foster collaboration among governments, NGOs, and civil society to strengthen policy impact and support training for local NGOs and community leaders in gender-sensitive conflict analysis and feminist foreign policy advocacy. Finally, we stand united in our call for a feminist foreign policy that is not just reactive but preventive. A policy that doesn't just address the aftermath, but actively seeks to dismantle the very structures that lead to conflict and war. Thank you.
My name is Hala Karib. I am the Regional Director of the Strategic Initiative for Women in the Horn of Africa. I have been working in the Greater Horn of Africa for almost 20 years. It's important to rethink the concepts of security, peace, and violence. Those issues are multi-layered issues within states, within communities, and societies. Violence is more than the use of force or physical injury. Peace is more than the absence of armed conflict. Interconnected and multi-layered structural and individual systems of violence present in society need to be transformed. This process can be supported through the use of positive peace approaches, fostering attitudes of institutions and structures that create and sustain peaceful societies. Therefore, our recommended action is to strategically partner and invest in research, in pilot interventions to develop and implement feminist approaches to peace, security that provide an analysis to diplomacies, to policies, and to programs across various societies.
I am Itandewi Olivera. I am an indigenous woman working in development, and I think a feminist approach to foreign policy encourages women and diverse genders' numerous, evident, and critical contribution to peace and security. Real feminist foreign policies ensure substantial and inclusive core funding for peace builders representing historically excluded groups and guarantee meaningful involvement of people to influence policies that are directly affected by. My recommendation is to reduce barriers and facilitate regular and meaningful involvement by historically excluded women and gender minorities representing civil society communities, and fund women flexibility and, in the long term, working towards inclusive and sustainable peace and security, including as activists and at community level.
My name is Callum Watson and I work in gender-responsive small arms control. Anti-feminist rhetoric, policies and repression are at the heart of a coupled rise in authoritarian and patriarchal backlash. This is connected to well-resourced and coordinated transnational networks seeking to subvert human rights protections in order to gain political power. Anti-feminist movements need to be recognized as a serious risk to security and to democracy. Therefore, our recommended action is to adopt anti-feminism as an early warning indicator of conflict, human security crises, and eroding democracy in foreign policy analyses, as well as in violence and atrocity prevention frameworks.
My name is Esther Soma, and I am a Senior Project Officer at PAX South Sudan. Feminist foreign policy needs to take an intersectional approach. Such an approach makes visible the ways in which various forms of inequalities often operate together and exacerbate each other. Explorations of those interacting systems of power, for example, of gender, race, class, sexuality, or ability, need to be put at the center of feminist foreign policy. Therefore, our recommended action is to ensure strategic analysis and policies explore and address how intersecting systems of power underpin inequalities, including the impact of past, current, and future foreign policies.
A real feminist foreign policy entails a whole-of-government approach, in which domestic and foreign policies are coherent. Its implementation needs to be ensured in all areas, particularly trade, high-level diplomacy, and defense. This, in turn, requires leadership from the highest levels. Implementation should be monitored closely with clear lines of responsibility. Across government, there is a need for commitment and capacity strengthening of civil servants on FFP to ensure a holistic approach to strategy and policy implementation. The recommended action is to adopt feminist approaches across government, lead by the most senior level involving all relevant ministries in FFP development and implementation, and ensuring coherence and domestic policies.
Hello, my name is Fatima Jafari, a human rights defender and former member of Provincial Council from Afghanistan. I think the legitimacy of feminist foreign policy and that of the implementing country is based upon the degree to what the state in question practice what is preached. This does warrant adherence to the R's mentioned before, but also to work toward promotion of inclusion, equity, and diversity within government and in national level policies as well. Therefore, our recommended action is to take a feminist approach in assessing and monitoring the implementation of feminist foreign policy, including in national and internal level policies and practices, building in accountability feedback loops to understand the impacts. Thank you.